our goal today is to talk a little bit about what makes veterans and then also military spouses entrepreneurs that are unique with a unique skill set, set of experiences. And beyond that, take that experience and discuss a little bit about how that could apply to any startup. So not only talk about some of what makes veterans in the startup world, but how does that differentiate from how other startups are run that don't have veteran entrepreneurs. So let me first by just asking in the audience, do we have any veterans? Nice, good. So any military spouses? Okay, light on those. How about for those people that have family members that have served? Good. I think we covered just about everyone. So first of all, thank you to those of you that have served. So let's do a little roll call first. Who do we have from Navy? One guy? Two guys? We've got three, okay. How about Army? Marines?
Hoorah.
Hoorah. There we go. Air Force? Got some people in the back. Nice. Coast Guard? Not big in Colorado. Cool. It's okay. You have to ask. There are 5 branches. So quick introductions here on the panel. Going to my left here to your right, we have David Cohen, founder, CEO, and managing partner of TechStars. Are you adding another title soon?
No, I took the CEO when I took away.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Just managing partner.
managing partner, founder, TechStars. Then we have Matt Hyde. He's an attorney with Cooley, which is a great law firm that does a lot of work in the startup space, amongst other things, and has been a supporter of Patriot Bootcamp. We'll loop back to what Patriot Bootcamp is in a second. We have Nick Gray, who's the CEO and founder of HyperLoco, Patriot Bootcamp alumni from 2012, I believe.
Roger.
Yep. And then we have Bindita, who's VP of Sales and Business Development at Full Contact. He's also one of the chairs of Denver Startup Week, so we owe a lot of thanks to him for making all of this happen. So thank you. And then we have Dave Cass down at the end. He's the CEO and founder of Uvise, and an alumni from Patriot Bootcamp 2012 as well. So the connecting thread that kind of brings this group together, because there's lots of entrepreneurs that are veterans in our community, is Patriot Bootcamp, which, just as the short overview, is a program that we've worked on at TechStars for almost 4 years now. We've run 3 programs. One's going to be next week in Madison, Wisconsin. And it really was an effort to say we want the startup community to be inclusive of lots of different populations. There's a larger program called Rising Stars, which reaches out to multiple underrepresented populations in the startup community, but we specifically want to work on veterans. So we've had over 225 veterans and military spouses go through the program. We've had 175 plus veteran-led or military spouse-led companies go through. They represent people from over 35 states, 3 foreign countries that have come to the programs. They've been in Washington, D.C. twice, just did one in May in New York City, and then there'll be the one in Madison. The outcomes from those include, which we'll talk a little bit about on this panel, people just founding companies and bootstrapping, going for that cheapest form of capital known as revenue. There's also people that have gone the fundraising route and gone through accelerators like the Kaplan Education Accelerator that Dave Cass went through, and other people through TechStars Chicago, and also accelerators that are not related to TechStars. So I'm going to have each of you guys introduce yourselves in a second, and I would love for you to talk about not only what branch of the military you came from and kind of how you jumped into the startup scene. But first, I want to just give everyone, I know we have a lot of veterans, so you probably know some of the stats, but kind of a state of where we are and why I think this is relevant. Right now, we're at an interesting point. Less than 1%, approximately 0.5% of the population serves in the armed services in the United States. If you compare that to the World War II time, which some people were children in that could be in this room, or have parents that raised them from that, those people came from an era where 12% of the population served. So while I think a lot of people have some connection to the military, whether it's someone, a family member, a neighbor, that separation and that distance between the average connection has increased. But what we're facing is that there's still 1.5 or 1.4 active duty members out there, about 850,000 reserves, and 21 million veterans. And if you take that with the military spouses in those populations, you get to almost 50 million people that are kind of related to what we're talking about. So it's not insignificant. The other thing too is that we're just in terms of the shift of the military itself. Right now, using the Army as an example, there's about 514,000 people in the Army. That's expected to be down from the acts of Congress and drawdowns to like 440,000 by 2019. So what that means is there's going to be more and more veterans coming into just the general economy. And my hope is that there's a great place within entrepreneurship and the startup world for a lot of those veterans. So let's kick it off by just kind of going down the panel. Maybe, David, you can give a little perspective on how we started Patriot Bootcamp from your perspective, and then you guys can talk about the companies you've worked with, Matt, and then respectively the companies that you guys have helped found and built.
Yep, great. So I would echo your thanks to those that have served in the military and our veterans here. It's awesome to be with you all. Where did this come from? It came from you. You walked into my office one day and said, I want to do something. And we had been talking about around TechStars doing things to just try to support underrepresented groups that are not in entrepreneurship that we don't see enough of. And that's really broad. That's a lot of different types of people, and we part of that is sort of the veteran population, the military population. And you said, I want to do something about that. And we had been thinking about the broader issue of how do we reach out and use the TechStars network to help more groups, more types of people getting into accelerators in general, getting funded, that we're not seeing enough of. Right, and when you said, "Hey, I want to go and create this event," right, we just sort of leaned into it, went and found some amazing sponsors, and we created this 3-day Patriot Bootcamp. All of that is, you and Tom and the hard work of all the volunteers that have been around that, and it's just been awesome to see what's come out of it. My perspective on it was simply, one of the key mantras around TechStars is this idea of give first, and it'd be easy to say, "Yeah, we're trying to give something to veterans." I don't actually flip it around and say they gave first to us, right? And it's the least we can do to try to support them and their entrepreneurial endeavors and try to connect them through the broader network we have. The other big idea around TechStars is this network that we're putting together. And when I look at veterans, I say, what an amazing network, right? That they all want to help each other. And what a powerful force that could be, right, inside a company that's growing and looking for more talent and all of that. So you put all that together, it was sort of a no-brainer, and it's been amazing to watch what these companies have done. Not because of our help, it's a 3-day thing, right? But we're able to introduce them to someone. Maybe they get funded, maybe they get some opportunity they wouldn't have otherwise gotten, and that's an awesome way to try to give second to those who have given first. So that was how we thought about it.
Yeah, and one thing I'll just add to that is that in our mind, it was just such a fit because they've already given first. We would like to give something back, but really it was kind of all one of those classic all boats will rise with the tide, and that we know that they in the past have been great entrepreneurs, and having them more in it would make this community stronger and probably bring more veterans in and just all work together. So, Matt.
Oh yeah, thanks. So just by way of background, I am now an attorney, a corporate attorney, which is kind of a big change from my prior career, which is I was a helicopter pilot in the Navy for 10 years. I left active duty in 2003, and during law school thought I should maybe continue my military career by joining a reserve squadron. It was a special operations squadron in San Diego. Happened to get a little more excitement than I bargained for. After my first year of law school, I was deployed to Balad, Iraq, flying around in the middle of the night all over the desert. But when I did get back from that, I kind of hung up my helmet and really got serious about corporate law. I ended up here in Colorado about 3 years ago, and I had a kind of a passion for and a very high interest in working with early stage companies, not just kind of on the corporate side, but it allows me to actually provide counsel with a little c, and I really enjoy that. And I happened to be looking on actually it was Brad Feld's blog, and I saw a post by Dave Cass and Taylor McLemore about the Boulder startup scene and veterans' role in it, and I hadn't met either of these guys before and thought, wow, this is really interesting. I'm totally on board what they're saying, and I looked and found out about Patriot Bootcamp, so that really excited me. And I think probably, I would suspect most of the guys on this panel that were in the military, probably what they miss most is the camaraderie and the network and the feeling of belonging to a team. And I would say, to echo Dave's point, that within kind of the Colorado entrepreneurial startup scene, that we have something just like that. And I think that's combined with the veteran population and kind of everybody that comes to these type of events has been really rewarding. And that's why I like doing this. And I have fortunate enough to have some companies that have or clients rather, that I work with that have veterans, and Nick and Ben are two. But it's really, really exciting.
Nick?
Well, thank you, Taylor. Nick Gray here with Hyperloco, CEO of that company. As Taylor said beforehand, I was in the Army. So what I did over there was a platoon communications NCO, and my time in the military, at least in Iraq, was in charge of tracking NATO and any force movements during nighttime operations, and this is how I got the idea for the company. And it was the fact that I wasn't able to go ahead and actually identify where people were inside of buildings, and not having that type of intelligence back then really was the difference between life and death, and ultimately resulted in the loss of American lives. And so it was something that I took back with me to the United States, and I was hell-bent on finding a solution for that problem. And so I started, researching things, and came across the CTO of the company, Damon Baker, who served in the Marines as well. And he had the solution. And so we went ahead and formed a company, we put it together. And a couple years later, we're doing quite well. But what kind of gave us the kickstart, though, was Patriot Bootcamp a couple years ago. And I think one of the biggest things that I walked away from that was being part of the Rising Stars program, and then getting a mentor, which is David Mandel with Pivot Desk. And the first time we sat down, he asked me to go ahead and tell him my story. And so I told him, and the first thing that comes out of his mouth is, "Your story is complete bullshit." And because I was trying to go ahead and do this whole tech, term and everything, and he goes, "What's your actual story?" And so I told him the actual story of how the company came about. And he goes, "Use that." And so every time that I go ahead and speak, with investors or, with clients or prospective clients, I don't always go ahead and start out with that, but I try to go ahead and weave that into the actual conversation, because it makes the whole entire thing become more real, and for the fact that the company actually is solving real world problems, and it came from a place as to where it was the difference between life and death. And so that's kind of where we're at right now, and what I've taken away from Patriot Bootcamp. But to what Matt has said, though, as well, it is definitely about the camaraderie, though, being able to go ahead and be a part of that, and being with people that have been in the same situations that you have, and not only in the military in a wartime environment, but also in the kind of the war that we're fighting in the startup scene as well. It's very difficult, from day-to-day operations. You encounter a lot of pitfalls, and you try to go ahead and climb out of them, and trying to go ahead and find resources, and to go ahead and get your way out of those, and prevent yourself from falling back into those pitfalls, those pits, should I go ahead and say. So it's been good stuff.
Ben?
Hi, my name is Ben Data. As Taylor said, I'm the Vice President of Sales and Business Development at Full Contact. My CEO likes to joke that when I write my autobiography, it'll be called Selling Death, Doors, and Data, because that pretty much is my career. I spent 3 years in the infantry. After that, I ended up on recruiting duty out here in Denver, Colorado. So that was really kind of my introduction to sales and marketing, was putting young men and women into the Marine Corps, which was it was a great learning experience. I learned a ton. After that, I actually moved over to a private equity-backed building materials manufacturer here in Denver, which did high-end doors. Not something I really thought I was going to be doing, but again, it was a great learning experience. Doing projects like the Marriott Marquis in Times Square and the Four Seasons Vail and stuff like that. While I was doing that, I started my MBA at DU here, and during that met our CEO and founder, Bart Lorang. He was in between startups, and that was how I ended up, really, was that having that connection. And so that's kind of one of the reasons why this is so important to me, and I'm so passionate about what Taylor's doing and everything else. Is it is all about your network, and it is all about your connections, and I think that's a great way for those of us who already are in this community to bring in more high quality people. And the veterans out there, I think, provide a lot of great capabilities and that need to be into the startup community.
That's great, man. Mr. Cass?
Thanks, Taylor. How's it going? I'm Dave Cass. I'm CEO of UVise. At UVise, we build online military veteran centers for colleges. And what that is, it's an education portal for students and also software that runs their mentorship program. How I ended up here, I'm an accidental boulderite, I'm an accidental entrepreneur, and I'm an accidental teacher. I still teach at CU in the business department. I was stationed here in the Navy to teach in the RC department, training the next generation of officers. Thought I'd go to business school at the time. That's how I got introduced to the entrepreneurship community in Denver, Boulder, and even more specifically the TechStars community. I got out and I took a corporate job, and I was really miserable. But looking back on it, it was a great experience. I missed the camaraderie as someone here. I'm a helicopter pilot too, like Matt. Usually that's my thing.
Sorry, that's why I said.
Yeah, I did a couple deployments in Enduring Freedom and Iraqi Freedom. I always say that I shot bad guys on the high seas, and by shoot I mean I took their photo. Shooting pictures there. So I took a corporate job, and I wasn't. I missed the camaraderie, but I also really missed the sense of mission. And I had started this program while in the Navy about academic success, and I was having a beer one night with the TechStars mentor, and he so kindly said, "You're always talking about this problem. You're always talking about a solution to it. Why don't you just quit being a pussy and do something about it?" And some people know probably who this mentor is on the stage. But that's what I found. So I went through the Patriot Bootcamp program, and I met sort of my tribe, as I say. It was awesome to meet other veterans that were finding new missions in life and that sort of thing. Then I did the Rising Stars program. And then I did the TechStars Education Accelerator, TechStars Kaplan. Did I get that name right, David? The Education Technology Accelerator powered by TechStars.
Close enough.
And that really changed the trajectory of what we were doing. And I'll say about the entrepreneurship community and TechStars community, it was the only place since leaving the military where I found that sense of camaraderie, that sense of team. So I'm extremely excited to be able to be part of that team, but also to continue to serve my previous team, which is military and veterans.
It's great. So one of the things I'd love to dive in first is a few of you mentioned the camaraderie. But part of what I find interesting hearing about military experiences is that there's multiple forms of mentoring that occur in the military setting that set you up for success, right? Which I think a lot of people from the outside looking in just assume is kind of the hierarchical, you have superiors that hand down orders and tell you what to do, which does exist. But actually, a lot of what makes the whole machine that is the military hum is the peer mentoring with the people that you stand next to every day that help you figure out how the heck to get the mission done. So would love to kind of hear your guys' experiences with that, both from the military perspective and then how you compare that to, because I think in the startup world, there's a lot of talk of peer mentoring as well, mentoring or advising, and just kind of compare and contrast and say, coming with the military perspective, this is what I had experienced, and this is the difference I saw in the startup world. Anyone?
You feel that one first.
You want me to?
Yes.
Peer mentor is something I just feel astronomically strong about. Mentorship in general is, my company's all about mentorship and instilling mentorship programs. It's built right into the military. And what I say when we talk to schools is, in the military, generals don't mentor privates. It just doesn't happen. I spent 10 years as an officer in the Navy, and I never had a conversation with an admiral once. I wasn't even allowed to make eye contact most of the time. But peer mentorship is built right into the system. And the quick story, I know you guys have heard me tell it, is I remember when I first stepped into my squadron, and we were doing these training operations, and I flew with my skipper. And it was intimidating to fly with him. And we were going through a maneuver, and I was doing very terrible at it. And he said his advice to me was, "Dave, you just got to feel it." And I'm thinking, like, shit, like, what the hell does that? I can't do anything with that. What does that mean? You just got to feel it. The next day, I went out with a lieutenant that was just about 2 years older than me at the time, and he said, "All right, Dave, in this maneuver, what I want you to do is step on the left pedal about the same amount of strength you would do to crush a roach, and pull in a collective a little bit about the length of a quarter." And I was like, okay, this is very tangible advice that I could only get from a peer, because the skipper had been doing this 20 years, and he couldn't give me the advice. I view the same thing with academic success with UVIs, and I feel the same way about peer mentorship in this community. If I reach out to a Patriot Bootcamp graduate, if I reach out to another CEO that's maybe a year or two ahead of me, the chances are we're going to spend an hour together. We always have each other's back. When I reach out to more established mentors, someone like David Cohen, he's managing or mentoring hundreds of companies. Is that fair to say at any given time? His time is more limited. So the sort of the higher you go up in the chain of command of mentorship, maybe the less time you have, and I try to be very specific If I reach out higher up, but peer mentors have time and they just did what you're doing. And that to me is some of the most powerful form of mentorship you can possibly have.
Any other thoughts from you guys?
Yeah, absolutely need to echo what Dave said there. I mean, I think anybody who is a veteran here remembers when you first checked into your unit, you have your command who's one thing, but it absolutely is those people who are at your level but have just been there a little bit longer that really get you set in. And that's a huge piece of it. And talking about what veterans bring to a startup world, that's, I think, a huge piece of it as well. Because especially when you look at startups at the founder level, it tends to be very good mentorship. But once you go to that next layer down and you start talking about people who are leading your individual teams, there's not usually a lot of experience at that level or a lot of mentorship. And so when you bring in somebody who is a veteran and has that mentality, they're able to start doing that and start mentoring the people who are part of their team and reaching out to other VPs of sales, other heads of marketing, other heads of customer experience, and building those networks there. Because I think that's kind of an area that sometimes can be a little weak in the startup scene. It tends to be very strong at the founders, but that next level down, and that's a great place to be when you're bringing in veterans.
I think that's a great suggestion. I mean, David, any perspective?
Yes, I just want to tie that back to, so if you're not familiar with the Patriot Bootcamp, it's this 3-day event, and there's this mystique. What is that? Is that going to change the trajectory of these companies? And no, I mean the curriculum is not. It'll help a little bit. What does is what I heard from so many people that have been through it, which is I actually didn't know there were other people like me, veteran trying to do a startup. I didn't know any of them, and now I have this community that I can find people who have been doing it for a year or 2 or 3 or 4, right? And I could sort of talk to them about what I'm going to encounter, and that's been the most powerful thing about it is that super vibrant Facebook group and the fact that they're coming back together and sharing lessons and stories, and that's that network around it. And so if there are people out there that think they're alone, no, there's some community out there for you, and this is just one example of that.
I just want to add one thing to that. Is it working? You good? All right. And it kind of goes off what you're saying right there. Is when you go and you get to your first unit or whatever. I mean, obviously your E1, E2, E3, or officers are obviously completely different. But number one, they're overpaid.
Unlike entrepreneurs.
Yeah, unlike entrepreneurs, we don't get paid pretty much anything. But when you first get to your first duty station, is that you have the people that have been there, a couple weeks, couple months, maybe a year, whatever, they're basically kind of the same level as you, or the same pay grade, but they're going to go ahead and help you get squared away. And that means, being able to go ahead and understand the daily routines of your unit, making sure that your uniform's squared away, your room's squared away, et cetera. And then when you transition, at least when I transitioned into being an NCO, I started doing kind of more peer-to-peer mentors with other NCOs and how to go ahead and lead troops. And understanding, how did you go ahead and deal with this particular issue that came about with a private. And so taking that into the startup world, when I first started, getting involved in everything, I started having these conversations with people that have been there a little bit longer than me, and they went ahead and said, okay, you need to go and do, X, Y, and Z to go ahead and get yourself squared away. And now I'm at the point as to where I'm starting to go and do that with new people that are coming into the community, saying you do X, Y, and Z to go ahead and get squared away. But now I'm starting to go ahead and reach out to people that are well established, that have started hiring people. And my company's at that stage. And so now I'm reaching out to them and saying, how are you hiring people? How are you dealing with this? How are the HR problems? Who are you using? So there's a lot of parallels that are drawn between the two, I think. So.
Yeah, I would echo that kind of external network you're able to leverage more and more kind of the longer you're in the community. I doubt this is unique, but I often get phone calls from, I don't know, maybe 2-3 times a month from veterans that are transitioning, or somebody that went to the Naval Academy, or somebody that somehow found my name. And crazily enough, some people actually still want to be attorneys, and I try and steer them away from that. But if they insist, I'll put them in contact with people I think can be helpful. But a lot of people are looking to get into the startup world and kind of ask my views. And I'm, now that I have this network, I'll say, man, you should really talk to so-and-so, or this woman here is terrific. And I think that it's not even kind of a give back first. I mean, it's almost an obligation. Like I can't imagine, having not met anybody, but if I called somebody, or if it was a veteran that I hadn't met, that they wouldn't take my call, or they wouldn't say, yeah, absolutely, I'm super busy, but, And I think it's that kind of expectation and the fact that without fail, people do that. They support each other. They get you through. They're not going to give you a job. No one's going to, there's no golden ticket, and no one's going to say, oh my gosh, you're a veteran. Well, let me just put your resume at the top. And I tend to make that pretty clear when I have these discussions. But there is that obligation and there is that network, and it's really it's easy to do with email and a 2-minute phone call. And I think I like being part of that. I like putting people together and helping vets, whether they're starting companies or looking to work at a startup company, get to where they're going.
So 2 major things that I think we can really summarize with the goal of taking this and distilling it down to how does it apply to any startup. One is that importance of mentoring throughout the startup organizations like you were talking about, Ben. And then the other one being that external network. But can we do that as a community? And I think in the Denver community, we're actually doing a pretty darn good job of this, Boulder as well, which is how do you as an entire Denver startup community sort of emulate that same thing, which is when a new entrepreneur reaches out, even if it is that question that you're like, oh God, that they have no idea which direction they're going or whatever it is. The point is we all say, yeah, let's jump in, let's help. And it goes back to kind of the give first mentality and how we were all there at one point, remembering we've all been there at one point and being willing to just open up the network and that we'll all benefit from it. So there's kind of another layer below this that I think builds all of the value that you guys were just talking about, which is just sort of an inherent belief in trust that exists in the military. That people have your back, which is something else I heard you guys say. I mean, can you guys share a little bit about just that either mission-driven focus that creates the trust or what elements of the military actually creates that trust and how that might resonate with the startup experience?
I think pretty simply, to put it simply, in the military, you have to have trust because that's the difference between life and death. End of story. As to how that kind of equates to the startup world, in a sense, I mean, obviously life and death is not on the line, getting that trust, but of a human being at least. But potentially the life and death of the company, though, is on the line, especially when you have co-founders involved. And so luckily in my company, we're all veterans, and people that we've been hiring just kind of happen to go and be veterans as well. So we kind of all have that same understanding of trust and respect more or less than anything. So,
yeah, well, and another way I would say it to just get you guys to react to it is it seems that the veteran entrepreneurs that I know have such a low tolerance for bullshit compared to drama compared to the average startup. And maybe that's just a cultural thing, but I don't know. Do you have a perspective kind of between some of the, I mean, you've been involved with veteran-led companies versus not, and just how to, whether it's related to military experience, avoid some of that and just create a culture of trust.
Yeah, limited data points, but certainly this sort of, the generalization of it, and of course it's important to remember that, it's all over the map as it would be in any population, is that, there's a lot of focus, right? And I love that because it happens to be my personality. So, when somebody comes in and says, look, I got 3 things I want to talk about, let's go. Here's number 1. That's my kind of meeting, right? And I would say I often get that. But, important to remember that it is all over the map, just like in any community.
Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah, I think for me, the big part of the trust is that, as Dave said, it's, that is definitely all over the map, but there's a higher tendency that they have the ability to be able to execute in an environment of chaos because they're used to it, right? I mean, I think anybody here who has been a veteran realizes that even like a lot of times when you're back in the barracks, it's still chaos half the damn time. The fire, the ranger supposed to got canceled, or the ammo didn't make it for your training run or something like that, but it doesn't matter. You don't have any excuses. You still have to get shit done. And the startup world is very similar to that. There's this chaos, and so that ability to have people that can still focus on the end goal and kind of let all the extraneous bullshit go to the side and then just focus on getting that stuff done. That's the piece that, for me, is the big piece of why I do trust those. I tend to have more trust with that, and I think they're great members to have into that. And they can also teach. I mean, that's the other part of it too, is it's not just saying you want all veterans. Sometimes as you bring in one of those people with the understanding that it's going to rub off, and it does.
I'll say we're not the most sensitive group.
So let's use that as a transition point. There's certain things from the military experience that you might need to forget or not deploy within the startup setting. What are some of those anti-patterns we need to know?
Nick, why don't you go first?
No. I was because he brings up an interesting question, and it was actually something that we were kind of preparing for this panel over the last few weeks, and that was kind of something that we were going to maybe kind of go ahead and talk about. And the biggest thing for me is what I was looking at is I'm used to, in the military, giving an order and having it done. And if it's not done, there are certain repercussions that happen. And typically it's corrective training in some aspects. Okay, so, well, because you're Navy, so.
Dave, surely you're familiar.
So, I mean, for me, it's pretty easy to go ahead and say to, Private Wong, actually was one of the soldiers that I had that I smoked quite a bit because he kept falling asleep at the wheel. But not while he was driving. I didn't make him do push-ups. But it was, it was a way to go ahead and make things go ahead and change. In the startup world, you can't really go ahead and tell somebody to go and do push-ups if they're 10 minutes late for a meeting. You can fire them.
Maybe we should.
And there's a lot of times where I want to smoke the shit out of people, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But I can't do that. And so I've had to go ahead and change my ways, especially, hiring people and being able to and talking to them a certain way, as to where it's not typical. I have to keep in mind, though, it's, okay, these are civilians. They haven't served in the military. They have no idea where I'm coming from, and they're going to think I'm absolutely batshit crazy if I go ahead and say this, something to them of that nature. So had to go ahead and kind of, tame it down a little bit.
Just pump the brakes a touch.
Pump the brakes a little bit.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean I'm not thinking it.
Yeah.
I'm always thinking it. I just don't act on it. So
Good. Anyone else?
I guess I would say kind of from the, as a service provider, or I have clients to answer to, where maybe I'm looking at something and, used to being in charge and kind of at the top of the game and thinking to myself, not certainly Nick or full context case, but, geez, that's absolutely the wrong way to do it. Or there may be something that kind of gets to somebody's character about the way they're doing something. And that's where I really, have to kind of bite my tongue a little bit and say, listen, I don't think that's right, and I don't think your investors would like that, and kind of the what you're doing, dude, mentality. As kind of, answering and being accountable, I think certainly whether it's, pressure that I put on myself, but if I do have clients that are veterans or have some sort of military background, I have a heightened expectancy of kind of I need to get it done. I told them it was going to be done there, and it's 5 minutes late. And generally, maybe somebody wouldn't care, but it's Nick, or it's Ben, or it's something, and it's it's kind of that expectation I carry with me. So it doesn't always kind of on my end is not always a benefit, but I guess it's that kind of that obligation to be there, to be on time, on target, to deliver. And I think I'm not calling the shots necessarily, but I'm used to supporting kind of whatever the bigger picture is. And in this case, it's building a company, or it's getting a financing or something like that.
Did you guys and every veteran in the audience have a tough time with the panel starting late? Is that challenging?
I have two problems. Is number one, yes, we did go ahead and start late. Number two, I'm used to having the room filled from front to back, and the first two rows are not really full. So that's really driving me crazy right now.
Anything else that you guys want to add?
I want to emphasize a community thing that Ben mentioned. Something you do in the military is you learn how to do something, you do it, then you teach how to do it. And it happens very, very quickly in a matter of a few years. I think that's mirrored in this community. Learn how to do something, turn around. When I got introduced to this community, I kept hearing this phrase, give before you get. And I would even go back to before I even joined the military. That sentiment was already part of us, and I think that's why we joined the community. But I also want to emphasize that camaraderie, service, giving before you get is not exclusive to people who wear a uniform. It exists all throughout the community, and that's sort of why I found a home here. So I always sort of challenge veterans to, hey, I love this group as a foundation of camaraderie, but we can't just stay within our meeting people like that are on this panel that didn't serve. The commitment is the same to service, others, mission, that sort of thing. So it's in this community regardless of who wore a uniform and who didn't.
That's great. Ben?
Yeah, just a quick thing to add on that. You're talking about things that you need to forget. And I think for me, it's always temper is a big one for it, but to just temper it down with that. But I think on the flip side, for those of you who are working with veterans, they can help as well, because they can help with perspective of, we all have a slightly different view of how we're perceived because we're used to how we were perceived when we were in the service. where it's okay to have the puffed out chest, be speaking with a loud voice, and being a little direct. I don't see that as being scary. That's just my personality. I was informed about 3 months after the job that I scared the shit out of the developers. And they're like, they don't want to come talk to you. So it's like, okay, I need to, realize that what I consider my inside voice needs to come down a little bit more and, be a little bit nicer. Not even nicer isn't the term, but that type of thing. So I think that that's how you can help too when you do have a vet coming in, is helping them understand how they're perceived by those who haven't served, because there definitely is a difference, just because it's different shared experiences.
Some of it's just hearing loss. We all have
A lot of hearing loss. You just have to speak up. That makes sense. Okay, so what I want to transition to is a little bit move away from the more anecdotal approach to this. We actually went through an exercise to what I'll call kind of decode the DNA from a personality trait perspective for this panel. So before we share those results, one thing that I want to acknowledge is that there is a rich history of veterans in not only being entrepreneurs around all different industries, but specifically within the technology industry. That's true here in Colorado. That's true in Silicon Valley. Some of the first VC firms had partners that were veterans. And in fact, some of what's really kind of considered core to being a good entrepreneur now and best practices, whether it's lean startup, for example, with build, measure, learn, and do that as fast as possible. Build, measure, learn was actually modeled on the OODA loop, which was built and kind of pioneered by Colonel John Boyd from the U.S. Air Force, which was observe, orient, decide, and act. So there actually is a lot of this DNA that I think already exists. So what we've done is we worked with a company called Perrin, which is a talent science company. They did, and they're involved in a few different aspects of Denver Startup Week, but took a basket of Denver founder entrepreneurs. And they looked at what traits, whether it's leadership, how selfless versus giving, and all this different stuff. And then what we did is we took a group of people from Patriot Bootcamp and compared those personalities. So Adam, are you ready to rock and roll?
Absolutely.
Good. I'll hand you the microphone, and please do more justice to introducing Perrin than I did, please.
Well, I don't think you did too bad of a job. You actually got it. So we're a talent science company. What we do is we deal in behavioral attributes. So we do a lot of dealing these days with students and figuring out which programs are successful in tuning certain behaviors. So if we have a program that's supposed to impact leadership, right now a lot of what we use to determine whether or not leadership was impacted is anecdotes. So one of the cool things, when we got the opportunity to talk with the folks from Patriot Bootcamp, we were really excited about that opportunity, just kind of dig into the data and see what makes veterans unique. And the data, it didn't let us down. Next slide, please. So as I said, before we dig into the data a little bit, let's understand why it's important. Most people are hired for skills and experience, and they're fired for behavior. And it's proven that about 80% of what makes somebody successful are those behavioral attributes. At Perrin, we measure about 150 different behavioral attributes. So we can go on to the next slide. The three things we primarily focus on are talent analysis, talent placement, and talent development. All that's done through one simple survey. It's about a 10 to 20 minute survey, and it's a self-descriptive adjective checklist. So there's 300 different adjectives. You describe yourself as you currently are. You describe yourself as you'd like to be. And from that, and a whole lot of science that goes into that, we determine a number of interesting attributes. So with that, we do this talent placement. This is kind of what we did against the gold standard for the CEOs. So the CEO group we measured, we found out what makes a successful CEO versus an unsuccessful CEO. And then we matched up the bootcamp folks that we tested against that gold standard. Next one is the talent development. That's that leadership piece. And then analysis is just looking at the data and cutting it any way you can. So next slide, please. A few of the interesting pieces that we found. So these are veteran high scores. That red line at the top, that denotes a critical high score. In other words, these are all behaviors, since they're over that line, that will really stand out in a person. So if you look at the first three, actually, you can see some interesting ones. So self-regard. This is a sub-scale of self-confidence. And actually, the self-assessment, there's 5 in here that talk about, 5 that are high, critical high, that talk about knowing yourself or understanding yourself or knowing how you'll act in a situation. So the ability to understand oneself in veterans is actually very high. This is higher than we see in a lot of the population. The second highest score is actually productive. And this one actually follows with another pattern. So productive, and then right at the end there, the second to last, industrious. That's kind of a hard work score. So how hardworking are you? And then the third one that we noticed, and this is going to be no big surprise to you, is 4 of the scales that you're looking at here. So social supportive, developing others, personal supportiveness, and service. Those are all team-oriented, service-oriented, group-oriented scores. So these are all really high. These are the kind of people that will that know themselves, that work well in groups, and that are hardworking. And then we can go to the next slide. So this is the first high comparison to startup CEOs.
Can you talk a little bit about the basket, who that was?
Yeah. Okay, so this particular group of CEOs was taken from the Denver Private Founders Group. So this is a group of CEOs that meets on a monthly basis. A number of the individuals have had successful exits, have run multiple companies, and are frankly just damn good CEOs. So when we started looking at the patterns, actually Michael, my CEO, and I were really, really impressed with some of the things we started to see. So this is the CEO top scores. You see almost across the board, me characteristics. So self-regard for CEOs, self-assurance, self-confidence, creativity, bravery, power, others need direction. That's basically other people are incompetent and they need me to tell them what to do. Leadership, ambition, determination. A lot of these are required for continually getting up in the morning when things aren't necessarily going well and slugging away even when you can't necessarily see the light at the end of the tunnel. So these are all really good scores. You can start to see some interesting gaps there, but a lot of these CEOs, good CEOs, have in spades. We can go to the next slide. So the next thing we're looking at is what are the low scores? What are the scores that are kind of opposite those highs? Most of our greatest strengths are also our greatest weaknesses. In this case, you start to see things that emerge particularly from that self-regard score, that self-confidence score. So a number of these scores are actually related to that high self-knowledge and high self-confidence. Actually, 5 particularly are. And so those would be things like coachability, help accepting, stress vulnerability, help seeking, support seeking. And actually, quite frankly, we were very surprised by this low conformity. I thought, military, there'd be a lot of conformity. But what we'll point out a little bit later is that the conformity score is actually unique. So you get, when you have a high understanding of yourself, the thing we basically boiled this down to was you're able to think and act on your feet. You're able to take a situation, break it down for yourself, and act. A couple of the interesting ones, so you guys were talking a lot about the ability to stick to it when it gets tough. The stress vulnerability score is really interesting, the fact that that's low. That's basically when shit hits the fan, you don't freak out. You stay level-headed, and you are able to continue doing your job. So, team scores. I need to point that out here too. So when we start looking at team scores here, we talk about coaching critical. Veterans are very low coaching critical. That's really important because what that essentially tells us is that when they approach somebody, they don't approach from a, you're doing this all wrong, fix it. They approach more from a stance of, hey, you're doing a few things really well. Let's work on a couple of other ones to make you really good at what you do. So that was really quite fascinating to us. Next slide. So these are the low scores compared to the CEO group low scores. One of the big things that stands out here, if we look at the first 3, we have a higher restraint and a higher self-control among the Patriot Bootcamp participants than we did among that CEO group. This is particularly fascinating. So one thing Michael always likes to say about CEOs is if they think it, it's coming out of their mouth. Like they have very low self-restraint usually, and that's kind of how they get stuff done. With the military folks and the vets, this is really fascinating to us because this shows that these folks are more likely when they disagree or different opinion to hold their tongue and not lash out, but to internalize that a little bit and sit on it, which goes back to kind of what Nick was saying. You think about it a little bit, and sometimes you're like, I'll go ahead and say that. And
obviously, I didn't take this. Was not a part of this. Yeah, that's a weakness of me.
So, yeah, and then another thing is that there is that conformity score is a little bit higher for CEOs than it was for vets. And then again here, when we look at the help seeking, support seeking, coachability, help accepting, it's all around the same level as these pretty stellar CEOs. So really fascinating data here. Can we go to the next slide? So this is the gold standard that I was telling you about earlier. We derive this from a group of CEOs that have been successful on multiple exits and have run quite a few companies. And the data up against it is the general data of the different vets that we took. When you're talking about averaging groups, this was really, really surprising to us to see how closely these were all followed.
And a lot of those Patriot Bootcamp participants are either first-time CEOs or just starting the entrepreneurial path versus the basket of startup CEOs, which have been serial entrepreneurs and with a lot of experience.
Yeah, and they, I mean, looking at the scores across the board from the low coachability, which corresponds really nicely with that high self-regard, to the support seeking and even close innovation scores. I mean, you're talking a very similar group here. All in all, when Michael and I looked at this, we were like, wow, if this is what veterans are like, why aren't we looking for more of them? Because this is really impressive to us. This is a pattern you don't normally see. So next slide. One of the things we're actually doing against that CEO gold standard is we're working with Denver Startup Week to kind of test out participants and attendees within the week. So we're putting that gold standard in an email. The follow-up email that'll come about a week after Startup Week is over, that'll gauge your just get your comments and feedback. We'll also include the survey that you can take, and then you can get measured against that same startup CEO group. So if you're interested in that, watch that email. It'll be in your inbox about a week afterwards. And then can we go back to that last slide? And then we'll just leave it here and let you guys roll on.
Great. Thank you for the work. Appreciate it. So I want to wrap up pretty quickly here so that we don't go the full 90 minutes, but would like to we're going to get to your guys' reactions to that as veterans. But first, as an investor, David, I would love to hear your reaction, because so often it's about how important the team and the people are. Of course, idea, company, traction, all that good stuff, but it's the people that really lead early stage investing. So what matches how you were previously thinking about patterns, or anything stand out to you different from that?
I mean, this you know, yeah, it's a little surprising, but it matches a lot of my direct experience, right? I would just say that one thing this does is maybe attempts to defeat some unconscious bias, right? Some people may have, and the difference between unconscious bias and conscious bias is, of course, you don't know you have the bias, that you think that somehow military veterans can't be great CEOs, right? I've witnessed that, right, around the system that, and some of the people on this stage, for example, I think are very good at doing this. And, I think you have to live in a community to get rid of an unconscious bias. Like, I had that, right? And I started doing this with you, and I realized in the first Patriot Bootcamp, oh, wow, there's like, in this community, there's officers and there's enlisted, and they're kind of different, and they even think of each other differently, and they have unconscious biases about themselves, and or maybe conscious in some cases. And I think you have to live in a community to realize it, and this applies much more broadly than just here. I mean, there's lots of people who don't think there's great software engineers that are women. You haven't lived in the community enough to see that there are, right, or whatever it is. And so I think the only way to break out of that is to be around it and to sort of understand it. And I think this gives an indication of what you could benefit from if you do have an unconscious bias like that, because I've seen amazing executors, people that have helped grow great companies time and time again. And I don't think that's a slice of it. I think there's a lot of great executors, right, that come from the veteran community.
Nice. What about you guys? What were your reactions to what you just saw?
I can't say I'm completely surprised. One of the things that always jumps out to me is the team element. And I consider myself a student of startups, and I'm always reading. stuff. I think one of the powerful things that comes across from military to startups is if you can build a team, no one is really that important in the military. No one individual is very important. If that individual gets transferred or killed, the unit goes on the next day. And if you can build a team and a company that if you get hit by a bus, it continues on. I know when I look around the room in my very small startup, I actually think of everyone on the team as way better than me in every way. So I can't say that I'm completely surprised by it, but I always hone in on the element of team. And to the conformity thing, I think a lot of people leave the military actually frustrated with the conformity of it. I look back on my career, and I loved my career, but I was always frustrated because I was always trying to change a program and do things different. And that same skipper that told me just to feel it said, "Dave, can't you just do things the way we've always done it?" And it turns out I couldn't. So I'm not surprised.
Yeah, I think, looking at all those qualities, it's not really surprising at all. I mean, I think at the first Patriot boot camp, and then again last year, I was just, may have been my own unconscious bias. I thought, well, it's TechStars Patriot boot camp, and I don't really know, there are all these people coming right out of the fleet or right out of the field, and, what kind of companies are they going to have? And I'm kind of, have a fairly sheltered life in Colorado. We have a lot of good companies that I work with, and didn't really know what to expect. And my first comment was like, geez, these are all incredible. And I thought, why is that my reaction? I mean, I'm a veteran. Like, why am I surprised? These guys are out there, and men and women out working in the fleet with technology every day. There's no MOS in the military where you're not interacting with a computer that I can think of.
MOS is job codes for you have a specific code for being a combat engineer or a pilot.
And while not all of these participants had technology companies necessarily, they had a laundry business or a high-tech business, and these are the people that are living with the frustrations, and they're innovating, thinking they're sitting around the ready room like, man, if we could do this better, if this machine only did this better. And they leave the military with not only ideas but often prototypes. They bring high-speed computers with them on deployments, and when they're not fighting wars, they're doing these things. And it was that type of initiative and innovation that was really impressive. So, should I have been surprised with that? Probably not, but it surprised me, and I think that's why I like to work with veterans, especially entrepreneurs. The low coachability, I think is interesting. I think the fail quickly mantra that seems to be rocketing around the startup world. I'm not sure how many vets actually think that oh yeah, that's what I want to do is fail quickly. I would rather be make it happen, make it work. But I think this pretty much is in line with what I would expect.
Let's open it up for questions. I think we're going to thank you. Any questions? Got one in the back there.
Yeah, I apologize if you brought this up early on, but for veterans that are recently maybe getting out of the military and moving to Denver, what would you recommend in terms of maybe groups, organizations where they could connect with people like you and other veterans, whether it's charity, just networking, anything like that? Because I'm sure everybody that has been in the military and gotten out, the biggest thing that misses the people. So what would you guys recommend in terms of finding like-minded groups, people, veterans just to hang out with, anything like that?
Well, the guy sitting right in front of you is the head of the VFW here. So that's a great place to start. They've got a great chapter here that's been very active, and especially with a lot of younger vets. I mean, that's the part that's really neat to see. I'm sure a lot of us our age remember the VFW was always, our dad's buddies or our grandfathers. Well, now it's people like us. So that's a great place to start with it. On the startup side, go to Built in Colorado. You can see all the different meetups that are going on there and find the ones that interest you, whether that's a sales, a marketing, a dev shop one, and start to build those. And also, too, just connect with every single person up here. I mean, we're happy to put you in contact with whoever might be able to help you out. I don't think Bo's here today, but Bo Bergstrom's a great guy. If you want to hear a story about how when you come into a community, how you get connected, talk to Bo. I mean, I forget how many people he talked to, 100, 200, 300, before he finally found, yep, this is the right way that I want to go to it. So.
No, there are some, and I think Bo kind of helps run this, but there's kind of an email list and in between the VFW and things like that. But I would encourage you, if you're interested in startup, have the veteran, but you don't need to lead with it, right? Like, just get out there and just kind of be the person you are and have the veteran thing in your back pocket. I think that's really, you're either going to be a quality worker, a hard worker, you're not, irrespective of your veteran status. So it just seems to me to just develop, but there are, some specific meetups and folks just kind of know each other. So just ask.
I'll just kind of add to that and say that. Okay, cool. Is that once the individual actually goes ahead and decides on, starting a business, being an entrepreneur, and he has that, or he or she has that idea, is as quickly as possible get involved with a tech hub or an incubator such as like Galvanize or Industry. There's some new ones here in town. Is it Thrive or Thrive
is from
Industry,
the industry
Galvanize?
people too, I think.
But-
or no, different. But anyways, there's a lot of different startup
Yeah,
hubs, and you can jump into any of them specifically, which you had an experience at Galvanize, and they were very welcoming. Right?
Yeah, and so what happened with me is that part of the Patriot Bootcamp, Galvanize, which is a local place here in town, actually they're national now too, but they went ahead and provided alumni of the Patriot Bootcamp a couple months free to go ahead and try it out. And what I realized being a part of a community like that, where there's full of all these startups that are in there, is that you're starting to go ahead and be, once again, surrounded by some sense of camaraderie. There's not too many veterans there. I mean, the place that I work at, there's probably like 2 or 3, but everybody there is fighting the good fight, and they're feeding off each other.
So I hate panels where every single panelist answers every question, but I'm going to do it anyway. So I remember a post on Brad's blog, he's in the back of the room there, that was a veteran saying, it's been hard for me to engage in the community. How do I do it? And I think that same sort of unconscious bias was existing on the other side in this example, where they really hadn't tried. Because once they tried, they were like, wow, I'm really surprised that I was so welcomed into the startup community. Yeah. Right? And so I think the key thing is just, there's so many engagement points, right, that you just have to encourage people to go do stuff and be a part of it and get into the flow. And it's actually pretty easy to get connected to others that have shared experiences or interests inside that network.
Can I add one more thing to that?
Quickly, and then
Let's do 2 rounds of answers for every
Yeah,
question.
I just want to say
that'll be
one
even
more
better.
thing. This is kind of in general, though, but I think veterans, all of us sitting here in this day and age, are very, very fortunate for the fact that, we're coming back from, war and getting out of the military, and we're being, welcomed with open arms. And, that hasn't always been the case in the history of this country, especially during the Vietnam era. And so I just want to say that I personally think that I feel very fortunate being an entrepreneur at this day and age rather than opposed to 30, 40 years ago. So.
Yeah. So since it's my turn now on round 2, specific things is reach out to me, taylor.mclemore@techstars.com. There's the Veterans Incubator of Colorado. Check out Vets in Tech, and hopefully we're going to start working on formalizing some more local stuff. So as specific action items. Any other questions?
Can I make a statement?
Sure.
Hello? Okay. So to their point, there is one in Centennial that's like a very large veterans group that we've started. It's about 6 months old.
Great.
It's called Vetrepreneurs. It's ran by Innovation Pavilion. So, and they're an incubator and stuff as well, and they've got a really large type of following right now, as well as a couple of programs, and they're teamed up with a kind of a boot camp type thing with Regis University as well too, for mentorship and entrepreneurship. So, check them out at Innovation Pavilion. Same thing, and they big supporters of veterans, and so I just wanted to share it.
Thank you.
It's Innovation Pavilion, the Vetrepreneurs program. Yes.
To play an entrepreneur. Thanks, okay.
That's what that was.
Wasn't quite sure everybody
Okay.
got that.
I thought it was animal doctor.
Got another question?
We're getting together and starting.
Actually, just following up on the previous question, the thing that I've learned here in Colorado is how many people are from here? And everybody else is not. That's why Colorado is so easy to network with. A friend of mine, the CIO, moved from here back to San Francisco, and the first comment he noticed when he got there was how cliquish the Bay Area was compared to here. And it's because everyone's from everywhere else. And then you add on top of that the veteran community, so you can even start your own. You can just approach someone on LinkedIn, and you'll be pretty receptive. So that's all.
Okay. Any other questions? Last point that I want to finish on is we've really focused on the veteran side of this. At Patriot Bootcamp, we do try to take an inclusive perspective on the military family. Veteran spouses, reservists, guardsmen and women are usually some of the people that kind of get forgotten in the equation of helping veterans. It's really important to remember that when all of us are thinking about building companies and bringing on employees, that they can be a great resource, and that, well, they might have different schedules than most people. They offer a lot of the benefits that we've talked about today in terms of employees. Now, going back to the military spouses one, I believe that this is one of the most untapped resources out there. This is a group of people that are generally very well educated, completely underemployed, and their biggest challenge is that they move very often. So if you're building a digital business of some sort, which I think most of us are, and you're looking for a distributed workforce that's intelligent and very dedicated, take a close look at military spouses. So with that, let's give a round of applause for the panel here. Thanks for everyone for being here.
I would like to say one more thing, and that is for Taylor. No. So when I first met Taylor and I found that he had basically founded Patriot Bootcamp, I said, oh, what service were you in? And he said, actually, I'm not a veteran. It's just something I'm really passionate about. And having watched Taylor for 2 years put together Patriot Bootcamp and the amount of work that goes into it, and I'm talking thousands of hours, and his continued dedication to this, it's inspiring not only for veterans, but for people that want to do things that are involved with veterans. You don't need to have a family member that's veteran if you're just interested or just want to do it. And I think Taylor's like the ultimate example of that. So thanks again, Taylor.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it. Don't be afraid of the civvies. Take it easy, guys. Thank you.